Hello, welcome back to Steins Gate Zero. Down an alley, a few turns off Main Strip, all the hustle and bustle of the crowd completely disappears. We were on the 7th floor of an old mixed-use building. We were in a Akihabara at the center of Tokyo, in the middle of the day on Sunday, and still the alleyway we'd come in seemed lonely and abandoned. There, we found the shop Daru had told us about. There was a cute anime style sign on the steel door that read Cosplay Media at Akihabara were open. Come on in. What is this? What? Shopping with Luke? Oh, neat. Okay then. The store was jammed full of cosplay outfits. The wall near the entrance held the new arrivals corner and popular cosplay sections, as well as cosplay wigs, ribbons, jewelry, and props. The other wall held the used outfit section and a shoe section stocked with socks, school shoes, heels, and boots. Even further back, I could see rows of school swimsuits and competition swimming outfits. It looked like the place sold mainly to girls, but this clearly wasn't a location where women would feel comfortable. The other tenants in the building were all shady shops with names like Drops of the Spirit God Inc., Space Radio Receiver Sales, and Flower Pedal Video Project.
ここには来たことが。
いえ、前に会った時は別の雑居ビルだったから、同じような怪しいお店だったけれど。
そうか。
I felt like I'd seen Daru's dark side. The shop was completely silent. There were no customers other than us. There was a thin man with long hair at the counter who looked like he worked there, but he didn't even raise his head up from his magazine when we came in. To be honest, ever since I'd entered, I'd worried that someone would think I was up to something illegal. Anybody who saw me would think I was a pervert taking a middle school girl to a shady cosplay shop. Right. Daru appeared from the back of the shop. There had been no sign of him a second ago.
そのマホタンというのやめてくれないかしら。
なんで？可愛いじゃん。
バカにされている気分だわ。
そんなことよりダル、お前どこから出てきたわ？
The man at the counter hadn't said anything, which meant they knew he was here.
とりあえずこっち。
Daru headed to the back of the store. One of the rows of hanger racks holding idol cosplay outfits was pulled forward, and behind it I could see a curtain. Past the curtain was a tiny space that led to a door marked staff only. If the hanger rack hadn't been moved, I have had no idea it was there. Behind the door was a cramped office. Well, no, the room itself may have been pretty big, but the darkness made it feel very cramped. It was honestly hard to breathe. There were 4 desks in the center surrounded by metal racks. The desks and floor were piled high with all manner of computers and peripherals. There were boxes and bags littered everywhere. I couldn't tell if they were trash or not. There were towers of magazines, games, plastic models, and figure boxes, and the desk was covered in garbage just like the one at the lab. It was too dark to tell, but I was sure the figures he had on display were covered in dust. And what did he need 6 monitors for anyway? Each of them displayed an image of the store. Evidently, it was footage from a security camera. Given the size of the store and the lack of customers, even 3 cameras would have been too many.
ま、適当に座って。
座れる場所なんてないぞ。
今スペース作るを。
Daru kicked aside the boxes on the floor to make room, then set down 2 folding chairs.
お前、この店とはどういう関係なんだ？
バイトリーダーみたいなもんかな。結構こういうアングラな店のバイト掛け持ちしてるんだよね。でさ、たまに事務所を個人的に使わせてもらってるわけ。
裏のバイトのためにか。
そういうこと。
Maybe there was a lot more to Daru than I thought.
ここにあるものは全部お前の私物か？
いや、他のバイトのみんなとの共有財産的なやつ。さすがにこんなにたくさん買えるほどお金持ってないし。
Or so he said, but who knew if that was true? Oh.
なんだ。
あんた
Uh,
まだ真帆先輩と一緒よね。
ああ、一緒だが。
どうかしたの？レスキネン教授からたった今聞いたんですが、和光市のオフィスが何者かに荒らされたって。え？あと真帆先輩のホテルからも連絡が来て、そっちも誰かに侵入されたみたいです。なんですって？すぐにレスキネン教授からも連絡があるはずですけど、少しでも早く知らせた方がいいと思って。
oh.
ありがとうクリス。ヒアジョーさんのことは俺とダルで見てるから大丈夫だ。
そうね。頼むわ。それじゃ。
Maho looked down and bit her lip.
懸念していたことが現実になったな。狙いは間違いなくクリスのノート PC とハードディスクだ。
え、マジで？
場所を変えた方がいいかもしれない。
ここは安全だと思うけど。
なんとなく嫌な予感がするんだ。勘みたいなものだ。
わかったわ。
それでノート PC とハードディスクはどこに？
Daru sighed and grabbed a locked fire-resistant case off one of the racks. He opened it. Is that where he hid it? The laptop was a deep red Japanese model with a 12-inch LCD screen. The hard drive was American, from a brand known for equipping its drives with a shock-resistant rubber case.
それを持って急いで出よう。
Both Maho and Daru nodded silently. Scary. As soon as we left the building, I could see a car coming down the empty alleyway. It was a big American RV. We quickly hid ourselves in the shadow of another building. My intuition was right. The RV stopped in front of the building we just left. 3 men came out. None of them were Japanese. They were all dressed in black suits, almost like MIBs. Whatever they were, they weren't Akihabara tourists.
間一髪だったな。
Maho went pale when she saw the men go into the building. She seemed to be shaking a little too.
こんなのまるで映画の世界だわ。とても現実とは思えない。
でもさ、あの連中は店の情報どうやって入手したんだろう。
ダルがヘマしたんじゃないのか。
僕を誰だと思ってる？
スーパーハッカーだろ。
ハッカーな。足はつかないように注意してるっつうの。
または俺とヒアジョーさんが尾行されてた可能性もあるが。
怖いこと言わないでよ。
和光市のオフィスやホテルだって荒らされたんだ。ヒアジョーさんがずっとマークされていたのは間違いない。
あ、そうだわ。
Maho seemed to suddenly remember something. She took out her smartphone and made a call.
教授に連絡しないと。
今日はどこかに身を隠すと伝えておいた方がいい。教授と交流すると教授にまで危険が及ぶかもしれない。
Maho nodded. People are after us. Rintarou took Maho to Ferris Nyanyan's home. It was on the top floor of a high-rise building in the center of Akihabara. If nothing else, it was sure to be more secure than the ancient building they'd just been in. Ferris welcomed the two of them, offering them food and a place to sleep. Daru returned alone to the future gadget lab to meet up with Suzuha.
このノート PC は存在するだけで災いを呼ぶだろう。手放した方がいい。
Once they'd both calmed down, she started to talk to him about what they were going to do with Kurisu's computer. He didn't budge an inch. Usually he was an introvert who never pushed too hard for anything, but this time he was extremely stubborn. Of course, so was Maho.
せめてロックを解除して中身について確かめたいわ。今のところそれもできずに手詰まりだけれど。
そんな悠長なことを言っている場合じゃない。今すぐ手放すべきだ。一番いいのはこの場で破壊することだが。
破壊するってこれはクリスの形見でもあるのよ。
君はもう少しロジカルな人間だと思ってた。
私はあなたがそんな冷たい人だとは思わなかった。
Maho's words made him flinch. Something bad had happened to him. That's how it seemed to her. And it was easy to assume that it had something to do with Kurisu. So she decided to ask him what she hadn't gotten to earlier during the fuss this afternoon.
あなた クリスの事件について何か隠しているように見えるのだけれど。
俺の知ってる
They're
ことなん
hiding
て
something.
どうでもいいような話だ。
Maho could tell he wasn't going to share. If they hadn't been interrupted this afternoon, would he have told her?
それよりこの PC をどうするかだ。これはもう友達の国なんていう指摘が出るものじゃない。国家規模の争争を引き起こす代物なんだ。
一体どんな陰謀論よ。
この後に及んで陰謀論だと言い張るのか。君も見ただろう、あの黒服の外国人たちを。君の通うオフィスも寝泊まりしているホテルも荒らされた。クリスの自宅だって放火された。その放火事件の後、君の研究室に FBI を名乗る謎の男たちが調査に来た。前にホテルの駐車場で襲われたことだって、もしかしたら関連があるかもしれない。普通なら絶対に遭遇しないような出来事が立て続けに起きている。これは偶然じゃない。
だからって国家規模だなんて。
The whole thing just seemed like too much of a stretch for her. Trying to connect every single event was a trap that conspiracy theorists often fell into. But in fact, most things that happened didn't really mean anything. When she began to tell him that, what he said next surprised her.
事態はこの先、ジョン・タイターの予言通りに進むだろう。
ジョン・タイター？
Maho had never heard that name before.
10年前にアメリカのネット掲示板に現れた人物だよ。2036年からタイムマシンに乗ってやってきた。自称未来人だ。俺はそいつが本物だと知っている。会ったこともある。ジョン・タイターによれば2015年には第三次世界大戦が起きる。その原因はタイムマシンだ。
バカにしているの？
至って真面目だ。中鉢博士のことを知りたがっていたな。奴はクリスの父親だ。中鉢論文にはクリスが関わっていた可能性がある。
なんですって？
Maho had read Dr. Nakabachi's paper out of curiosity. Last summer, he proudly announced his paper on time travel to the entire world just before fleeing to Russia. The paper itself, however, was so poorly written that it was of no value whatsoever. She couldn't believe that Kurisu might have been involved in writing it.
論文は劣化版で、もしもクリス自身が書いたオリジナルが存在するとしたら、クリスの残したノート PC とポータブルハードディスク、その中身が実際のところ何なのかは関係ない。ただそれを手に入れたがっている連中がいるんだ。
ちょっと待って。少し整理させて。
Could what Rintarou was saying be true? She took a moment to think. Normally she wouldn't give something like this a second thought. But what had been happening around her lately just wasn't normal. She couldn't outright deny it. Besides, she was nursing a conspiracy theory of her own.
私もこの PC が狙われているかもしれないという予感はしていたのよ。ただ、あなたの話は私の予想とはあまりにもかけ離れすぎていて。
予想とは？
アマデウスの軍事転用のことじゃないかと考えていたの。
軍事転用？
クリスは精神生理学研究所にもよく出入りしていたんだけど、時々場違いな連中がそこにやってくるって言ってたの。どうも国防総省の人じゃないかって。
アマデウスで人を殺せるのか？どうやって？
例えば百戦錬磨のパイロットから記憶データをコピーして無人戦闘機の制御に使うとか、あと以前話した医療への応用覚えてる？
人間の脳へ記憶データを書き戻すってやつかな。
そう、記憶データを修正した上で書き戻しが可能になれば、恐怖を感じない兵士やどんな非道な任務でも平然と遂行する部隊なんていう恐ろしいものまで作れてしまう。私はてっきりクリスがそういった実験の証拠を偶然知ってしまったんじゃないかと思っていたの。
なあ、 アマデウスの研究には米軍が関与していたりはしないよな。
するわけないでしょ。
本当にそう言い切れるか？君はあくまで研究者であってプロジェクトの総責任者じゃない。
レスキネン教授だって軍に関与なんてさせないわ。
だよな。あれは別の世界線の話だし。
世界線？何のこと？
いや、忘れてくれ。俺の考えすぎだと思う。
Oh, he hadn't seemed like he'd really meant that, and that really bothered her. She wanted to hear more about John Titor, but he didn't tell her anything else. Since she couldn't crack the security on Kurisu's laptop and hard drive, it did Maho no good to carry them. And just like Rintarou said, those attackers scared her, so she decided she had no choice but to give them to him. He didn't tell her whether he was going to destroy them or not.
Maho, 無事でよかった。
When she arrived at their office in Wako City, Dr. Leskinen was already there. He came over and gave her a big hug.
教授、苦しい。
おう、すまない。
She'd heard that the office had been ransacked, but whatever had happened had already been cleaned up.
教授が片付けたんですか？
荒らされたと言っても、もともと私と魔法しか使っていなかったわけだし、荷物も多くなかったからね。あとは警察に任せてある。
2 days had passed since the office had been ransacked. Maho had spent both of them at Paris's home, and only today had she gotten in touch with Dr. Leskinen and gone to Wako City to get her things. They were both going back tomorrow, just as planned. They meant they were saying goodbye to this office. Wait, that meant they were saying goodbye to this office.
まだ捕まっていないんですよね。
ああ、日本に来てから災難続きだな。
ですね。
The two of them looked around the empty office. It had been a busy 2 months.
魔法はどうだったかな。日本はもう一つの故郷でもあるわけだろ。感想は？
早く大学に戻って研究に打ち込みたいですね。この2ヶ月、資料をまとめてばかりだった気がするので。
魔法は真面目だね。
それと、クリスが最後の時間を過ごしたこの国の空気を感じることができたのは良かったです。
魔法。
But she still hadn't figured out why Kurisu had died. Actually, she had even more questions now. It bothered her to go home with so many questions left unanswered. If only Rintarou had told her everything he knew.
そういえば、
The thought suddenly occurred to Maho.
アマデウスのテスターの件はどうします？
Of course, she meant Rintarou Okabe. If both Maho and Leskinen were heading back to America, that meant that his time as a tester was over.
そうだね。
For some reason, the professor was taking a moment to think it over. She wondered what there was to think about.
テストはこのまま続けてもらおうと思っているんだが、どうだろう。
え？本気ですか？
実際、リンタロウと話すことで、クリスはこれまでにないような反応をして見せているだろう。今後は彼だけでなく、もっと多くのテスターを使っていきたいとも考えているところだし。
セキュリティの面で不安があるのでは？アメリカと日本だと離れすぎていて、何かトラブルが起きた時に対処できません。
大丈夫さ。私はリンタロウを信じているからね。
いや、信じるとか信じないという話ではなくてですね。
それにテストを継続すれば、魔法だって定期的にリンタロウと連絡を取れるよ。
私は関係ないでしょう。
そうかい？
そうですよ。
では今後のリンタロウとの連絡は私が直接取ることにしよう。
別に構いませんよ。
It still seemed like he wasn't telling her something, but she was too embarrassed to question him further. It surprised her, though, that he was so focused on Rintarou. He seemed to have taken a real liking to him ever since they had first met. Did he simply like the guy, or was it because he was Kurisu's friend, or was it something else? She didn't know. The next day, Maho and Dr. Leskinen returned to America via Narita Airport, just like they planned. Rintarou had come to see them off, and he was very surprised when Dr. Leskinen told him he could continue being a tester. And then half a year passed. And it's Stigma. What the? Major Conjure University. It was after 11 p.m. Some of the lads worked all night and into the morning, so the place wasn't completely abandoned. But compared to daytime, it was quiet. The lights in the halls were off, and it was a little scary walking down them alone. Maho lived in the researchers' apartments next to the lab. She'd been thinking about so many things that night, her head felt like it was going to explode. Then she looked out the window and realized that the lights were still on in the brain science lab. Dr. Leskinen must have been working late. She decided to put some coffee in a thermos and take it to him.
そもそもなんで私はタイムマシンの研究なんかに没頭しているのかしら。
Ever since she'd come back from Japan in January, she spent all her free time on it. Even she had to admit she was getting obsessed. Of course, since this wasn't something she could research in public, and since she couldn't let it interfere with her real job, she had to do all of it in her own room at night. As a result, she was staying up late battling the physics textbooks. An unfamiliar subject for her, exhaustion and lack of sleep were starting to get to her. The whole idea of a time machine was stupid. She still thought so, but she was surprised at how desperate she was getting.
それもこれも岡部さんのせいよ。
Yeah. What Okabe had said to her in Japan still stuck with her.
半ば地論文にはクリスが関わっていた可能性がある。
Rintarou could have been lying, or wrong, or simply delusional, but part of her wanted to believe it was real. Of course, from what she'd seen of Dr. Nakabachi's paper, she didn't want to believe Kurisu was involved. It was just that bad. But...
論文は劣化版で、もしもクリス自身が書いたオリジナルが存在するとしたら。
If she could have written it off as a slim possibility, everything would have been so much easier. But it was just like her, she thought, to be unable to do that. Oh, to find what Kurisu found, that desire was what drove her to action. But the more research she did, the harder it seemed. It was so hard, she was starting to lose faith in what she wanted to believe. Her usual complex started weighing down on her.
クリス、私やっぱりあなたにはなれない。
It's really easy to be curious about something like this. Kurisu was a dear friend, but at the same time, she was starting to feel jealous, frustrated, and hateful. And when all those feelings started going around in her mind, there was no way she could focus on work. It was time to chat with Dr. Leskinen for a little, and then go to sleep. She headed over to the lab.
教授？
ん？いや、魔法。
Dr. Leskinen seemed surprised at her sudden visit, but he stood up from his chair and welcomed her.
どうしたんだい？こんな夜中に。子供はもう寝る時間だよ。
その言葉、そっくりそのままお返しします。
違いない。
Dr. Leskinen laughed innocently, like a child, at her cutting remark.
私の部屋から明かりが見えたものですから。これ、どうぞ。
The cup on Dr. Leskinen's desk was empty. She poured him some coffee from the thermos. It wasn't the sticky sweet cafe latte that she liked. She made it straight black to match the professor's taste. The room was filled with steam and a pleasant smell.
俺は驚いた。魔法がカフェをご馳走してくれるとは。
私だってこのくらいの気は利きますよ。
でも君はこういうのが嫌いだっただろう。あれは
Oh,
確
Maho.
か君が
How nice of
研
you.
究所に来た最初の日だったかな。メアリーがみんなにモーニングカフェを配って回っていたら、君はそれを断ってこう言ったじゃないか。あなたはカフェを入れるためにここに勤務しているのですか？その時間があったら早く仕事を始めてはどうですとね。いやいや、すごい子が来たものだと驚かされたよ。
そんな古い話、今さら持ち出さなくてもいいじゃないですか。
Maho's cheeks swelled in embarrassment.
あの頃は天才少女とか言われてちょっといい気になってたというか、何もわからない子供だったんです。ちゃんと反省はしています。
Mary was another scientist at the lab. After Maho had apologized, they'd gone on to be
本
friends.
当に教授は意地悪ですね。もう二度とコーヒーなんて持ってきませんから、そのつもりで。
No! Just as she was thinking of taking the coffee, she poured back.
そうですよ教授、あんまり先輩をいじめないでください。
She heard a voice from Dr. Leskin's computer.
あら、クリス。
はい、私です。
ちょうど彼女のプログラムの検証中だったんだ。
She moved around to where she could see the monitor, and sure enough, the Kurisu CG model was displayed on it.
こんばんは先輩。
こんな時間までご苦労様。
Maho chuckled to herself. Kurisu was just a program running on a computer, but she still couldn't stop herself from saying things like that. After all the time they'd spent together, Kurisu was no different than a human to her.
別に私は魔法をいじめてるわけじゃないよ。メアリーとの件だって私は魔法を好ましく思ったものさ。極めて合理的でクールで、しかも面白い子だとね。だから私の助手になってもらったわけだし、もちろん今の優しい君も嫌いじゃないけどね。
Dr. Eskin gave her a wink as he reached for his coffee cup.
ありがとう。いただくよ。
As he drank his coffee, he grabbed the corners of his eyelids and gave them a little massage. He was acting cheerful, but evidently he was really tired.
プログラムの検証って何をしていたんです？
ああ、今まとめている論文のあれだよ。
アマデウスが嘘をつくメカニズムですか？
その部分のプログラムが解析できると、人間が嘘をつく仕組みももっと詳しくわかるんだよね。
女性の嘘は時に重大な秘密を含んでいます。それを暴こうというのは感心しません。
Kurisu's expression was deadly serious.
何も君の嘘を暴こうって言うんじゃない。嘘をつく時の思考の過程を知りたいだけだよ。
まあいいです。何か暴露する羽目になったら、まず真帆先輩が隠してる甘い秘密を喋ることにしますから。
ちょっとおかしなことを言わないでちょうだい。っていうか、甘い秘密って何？
なんでしょうね。
She played dumb. Sometimes Kurisu liked to joke around. It was infuriating and at the same time kind of cute.
例えばゲームセンターで彼に取ってもらったぬいぐるみの件、私が気づいていないとでも？
は？
The first thing she thought of when she heard the word arcade was what happened back in Akihabara, Japan. She tried so many times to get the stuffed animal and failed each time. Rintarou had won it easily and given it to her.
あれが何？
ずっと先輩のベッドに置いてあるんですよね。
何をバカなことを言っているの？あれはクリスのお母さんへのお土産よ。
じゃあなんで先輩の部屋に？
だってお母さんは新しい家をまだ探してるって言うし、それまでは仮のアパートメント住まいだし、引っ越しの時の荷物になったらあれかなと思って。
ですか？
ほんとよ。だいたいあのぬいぐるみは私にとってもクリスの大事な思い出なんですもの。抱いて寝るのがそんなにおかしい？
やっぱり先輩のベッドにあるんですね、あれ。しかも抱いて寝てるなんてとってもキュート。そのあたりもっと詳しく教えてください。
That stupid computer program had tricked her. By the time she realized it was already too late, both Kurisu and Dr. Leskinen, who'd been listening the whole time, were smiling at her. She glared at them, her cheeks flushed.
これはどうやらクリスの勝ちのようだね。
勝ち負けとか関係ありません。もう私は寝ます。おやすみなさい。
She turned to leave Dr. Leskinen's office, fuming. But before she could leave, Kurisu got in one final parting shot.
先輩、もう 後悔しちゃいますからね。
あのね、どうしてもあなたは私と岡部さんをくっつけたいの？
Maho stormed over to the monitor, but Kurisu seemed unconcerned.
たまには直接会ってみたいなって思ったりしませんか？
思いません。
そうか。残念だな。
For some reason, Dr. Leskinen shook his head sadly.
近々また共同研究で日本に呼ばれているんだ。その時、リンタロウに連絡を取ってみようと思っているんだ。魔法も一緒に連れて行こうかどうか悩んでいたんだが、これはやめた方が良さそうだね。
She'd heard nothing about this. Most of the time, whenever the professor had a project coming up, she'd hear about it through the school's network ahead of time.
日本へまた行くんですか？
うん。
She had to stop herself from immediately saying that she wanted to go too. If she did, Dr. Leskinen and Kurisu would make fun of her again. But she didn't want to miss this chance. There was still a lot she needed to do in Japan. More than anything, she wanted to talk to Rintarou in person about the time machine and about Kurisu. It definitely was not because she just liked talking to him.
ぜひ私も連れて行ってください。
Well, she's cute. In the end, she gave in.
おう、ついに素直になったんだね。
では告白プランを考えましょう。
あなたたち
Oh, I was starting to get tired of dealing with them.
ま、冗談はさておき、君を連れて行けるかどうかは微妙なところなんだ。
というと？
君は日本でいろいろな事件に巻き込まれたろう。脳科学研究所としてはそのことをかなり気にしていてね。
そんな。
クリスの件もあったし、優秀な人材をこれ以上危険な目に合わせるわけにいけないというのが理事たちの考えなんだよ。
私なら大丈夫です。現にこうして無事でいるじゃないですか。
ほう。つまり魔法はそこまでして日本にいるリンタロウに会いたいと。
いい加減セクハラになりますよ。
おー、それは勘弁してくれ。
でも本気で交際を検討してみては。将来的には岡部もこっちに来る可能性があるんでしょ。だったら今のうちに唾をつけておくべきですって。
おせっかいな親戚のおばさんみたいなことを言うのはやめなさい。
魔法の考えは理解したよ。私からも理事に話をしてみよう。ただし、だからといって日本に行けるという保証はできないからね。
はい、ありがとうございます。
私は結構本気なんですけどね。
まだ言っているの？まったく。
It really felt like she was talking to Kurisu. The feeling was much stronger than when they first started on Amadeus, and that reminded her of something she'd almost done many times, but stopped.
このクリスにタイムマシンのことを相談してみたらどうだろう。
She didn't know if Kurisu had completed the time machine theory before her death, but if she had, some clues to it might be hidden in Kurisu's memories. Of course, she couldn't ask her in front of Dr. Leskinen, and she couldn't let others hear that she was making a time machine. If the rest of the lab found out, they'd make fun of her for sure. It wasn't even her field of research to begin with.
それじゃあ教授、そろそろ部屋に戻って寝ます。
Maho took her thermos and was about to leave the lab.
あ、ちょっと待った。最近魔法の記憶データを全く更新していないだろう。Amadeus の魔法のことだよ。
ああ、
日本に行く前に採取したデータが最後じゃないか？
それはですね。
Maho didn't know what to say. He was right.
日本ではいろいろと怖い体験をしましたし、アマデウスに悪い記憶を残すこともないかなと。
気持ちはわかるが、このままだと比較実験ができない。
A comparison travel involved loading memories from both before and after a given experience into Amadeus and seeing how it changed. comparison trial, these trials allowed them to see what effects, experiences, and knowledge have in the brain, but after Kurisu's passing, they became solely Maho's
今の
responsibility.
君とアマデウスの魔法とでは あまりにも記憶が食い違いすぎていて別人と言ってもいいほどになってしまっている。
はい、そうですね。
このままだと君はこのプロジェクトから外して他の誰かに頼まなくてはならないかもしれないよ。
それは
Her expression darkened.
クリスばかり相手にしていないで、たまには自分も構ってあげなさい。きっと寂しがっている。明日必ず記憶の更新をしておくように。いいね。
わかりました。
Maho nodded her head and left the room. The reason she'd given to Dr. Leskinen for not updating Maho's memories was a real concern, but there was also another one. Rintarou's words.
なあ、アマデウスの研究には米軍が関与していたりはしないよな。
She had no proof, but she couldn't get his words out of her mind. With some great power involved in the Amadeus research, something so powerful it was outside even Dr. Leskinen's control. If she updated her memory data, Maho would learn about Kurisu's laptop and hard disk. She trusted Amadeus, but that would mean whoever was secretly trying to use the project for their own ends would find out. It seemed silly, almost delusional, to be worried about something like that, but she couldn't get it out of her mind ever since she'd come back to America.
でもやっぱり考えすぎよね。
She whispered to herself.
誰かそこにいるの？
She heard a woman's voice from down the dark hallway. Maho stopped dead in her tracks. The hallway lights flipped on, and she saw a group of men and women coming down the corridor that connected her building to the next one. The next building over was the psychophysiology lab. Maho's brain science lab mostly investigated the workings of the brain itself. The psychophysiology lab, on the other hand, was more of a medical department. They looked at how the workings of the brain affected mental states and mental illnesses.
すみません、比叡城真帆です。レスキネン教授の研究室の。
The woman at the head of the group was someone she knew. It was Dr. Reyes, a scientist at the
真帆だったの。
レイエス教授、こんな時間にお仕事ですか？
あなたも？
ええ、まあ。
お互いに仕事中毒だわね。
Judy Reyes' eyes narrowed beneath her glasses as she laughed.
アレクシスは？まだ自分のオフィスよね。
はい。アマデウスの研究を。
ほんとご就寝ね。自分の娘と勘違いしてるんじゃないかしら。
こんな時間にレスキネン教授にお会いになるんですか？もし緊急でのミーティングなら私も。
その必要はないわ。私の研究に少し問題があってね。至急彼の知恵を借りたいのよ。あなたがいても特に頼めることはないでしょうし。あ、気を悪くしないでね。でもありがとう。
Dr. Reyes kept smiling as she walked past Maho towards the lab. The other scientists followed her.
研究に問題って一体何だろう？
She took a closer look and saw that she didn't recognize one of the people in the group. It was hard to say why exactly she noticed him. He just didn't look like a scientist. When you spend enough time doing research, you start to get a feel for people who are in the same line of work. But he had a totally different air about him, and what was worse, he was behaving extremely rudely towards Dr. Reyes. If he was one of her staff, he wouldn't act like that, and while everyone else was wearing white lab coats, he was wearing a freshly pressed suit. It just didn't feel right. She was about to head back to her room when... It bothered her enough that she turned right back around and silently crept back to Dr. Leskinen's lab. The door was slightly ajar. She could hear voices inside. She knew it was wrong, but she decided to push her face up against the door to listen.
いつまで泳がせておくつもり？
貴重な情報源だ。下手に動いて破棄でもされたらもったいないだろう。いずれにせよ今月中に日本に立つ。そこで回収するつもりさ。
なぜ半年近くも様子を見たのか 納得のいく説明ができるのかしら。
彼らは我々が知っていること以上の何かを隠しているような気がしてね。そこでアマデウスを使って聞き出そうとしたんだが、かなり警戒心が強い慎重な青年だよ、リンターロ岡部は。
マホにお得意の施術でもしてあげたら。
彼女は何も知らないと思うがね。
Maho started to panic when she heard her name. And then she realized she made a big mistake. She was so focused on listening to the conversation that she pressed her shoulder into the door. The door to the lab wasn't very well built. There was a loud creak and everyone in the lab turned around.
誰？
She knew she should probably run, but her body refused to move. She couldn't understand what she was hearing, and even after they found her, she still couldn't move. She couldn't believe it. She didn't want to believe it. This was worse than being in a thriller, she thought. The other scientists who were with Dr. Reyes grabbed her arms tightly and dragged her into the room.
教授、今の話は一体。
Dr. Luskin looked a little sad as he walked over to her. His huge body leaned forward and peered into her face.
やれやれ、聞いてしまったんだね。まあ、ちょうどいい。魔法。さっきの日本行きの話だけどね。やはり君にも一緒に来てもらおう。
She didn't know what he meant. Weren't the directors opposed to it? Was it something Dr. Luskin could decide on his own? What was good timing? Confused, she glanced over at the computer screen, but Kurisu was no longer there. The one thing she knew was Okabe's words weren't the ramblings of a conspiracy theorist after all. It was almost July. The rainy season hadn't been that bad this year, and what little remained of it had already disappeared. Temperature-wise, summer had come a long time ago. In other words, it had almost been a year since it happened. And then one Saturday afternoon, if I stayed home, not only would it be hot, but Dad would be on my case about helping with the family business. To get away, I'd come to the area around Ikebukuro Station. A year ago, I could have gone to the lab, but with Suzuha living there now, I'd mostly stopped going. But that meant that it was hard to find a place to study on my days off. It was too much trouble to go to the university, and the classrooms probably weren't open on weekends anyway. After a lot of research, I'd settled on spending my free days visiting this cafe near my parents' home and spending a few hours there. In fact, a lot of the other patrons did the same thing I did, buying a single cup of coffee and sitting there for hours on end. Some brought books, some brought computers. I chuckled to myself as I realized that I joined the ranks of the other normies. Ooh. Oh. Very. So they went to my house. My family's business was called Okabe Greengrocer. It was a beat-up old store located in a rundown shopping street. The place was almost 40 years old. I really wanted them to rebuild it. Yes! Yes, I will go shopping with you, Mary. My mind wandered. Mary was going to be here in less than 15 minutes, so maybe it was time to call it a day. I'd worked pretty hard during the morning, so it wasn't too bad. I was a little surprised at how hard I've been working lately. I could feel how having a goal gave me energy. I needed to get to Victor Condra University as soon as I could. Since I was still testing Amadeus, I kept in touch with Maho via email and online chat. She must have been working hard because she was always sleepy. Oh, what is it?
Hi.
Hello?
どうして声を潜めてる？
今店の中なんだ。頼むから。俺の都合に関係なく連絡してくるのはやめてくれ。
あんたがどこで何してるかなんてさすがに把握してないわよ。それとも 私に24時間監視してほしいの？あんたが寝てる姿とかお風呂入ってる姿とか全部覗き見してほしいと？なかなかの変態ね。
知った口を聞いてすみませんでした。
私が連絡したってあんたが出たくなければ出なくていいの。それぐらいで怒ったりしない。
そうだな。
まあ今は迷惑みたいだからお望み通り切るわ。確かにスマホで 3D モデルの女と真面目な顔して会話してる大学生男子ってかなり気持ち悪いし。
お前な。
冗談よ。いつも相手をしてくれて、これでも一応感謝はしてるんだからな。
そういう話はいいからとにかく切るぞ。
Kurisu always talks so much. The real one used to talk a lot too. Talking to her in a place like this always drew a lot of attention and made me feel awkward. Looking at a screen and talking was embarrassing, was all. So I once proposed that I talk to her like I was on a normal phone. And this is what she said. I would have to stare up at a close-up of the side of your head. She really was a selfish little program. Mayuri and I met up and headed for Tokyo Hands. When I stepped inside an air-conditioned store, I felt refreshed. If it was this hot in June, I shuddered to think that it was going to be like in July or August.
それで一体何を買うつもりだ？
Yay!
商品宣伝用のポップを作るんだ。だからそれ用のカードとか
Yay!
蛍光ペンとか。
She's looking as cute as she always is.
違うよ。岡部製菓店で使うんだよ。
あ？なんだって？
My family business?
今日オカリンの家に行った時にね、おじさんとそんな話になって、じゃあマユシーが作りますって立候補したの。
おいおい。
My dad could be such a
お前が
jerk.
そんなことする必要ないんだぞ。
でもマユシーがやりたいからやっているのです。
本当にいいのか？
オカリンやおじさんおばさんにはいつもお世話になってるから。
じゃあ代わりに今度何かプレゼントするよ。
本当？嬉しいな。
I took a quick look around and saw that they were selling a lot of things you could use for advertising. I decided to mostly leave the purchasing decisions up to Mayuri. She spent quite a while deciding what to buy, but, well, maybe because of all the time she spent at May Queen None Squared, her taste ran in the direction of cute and anime. Part of me thought it was dangerous to leave it up to her, but still, they asked her, not me. It wasn't any of my business. I should just leave it to her. And so I decided to wander around the store while Mayuri finished her shopping, but... Yes?
どうかしたか？
もしかして買い物中？
ああ、マユリとな。
へえ、デート？
スイーツかっこ笑い。
その呼び方はやめろと言ったろうが。
だったらお前も恋愛脳の癖を直すんだな。
はいはい、わかったわよ。でも、まゆりさんって可愛いわよね。あんな可愛い年下の幼馴染がいるなんて、あんた恵まれてるわよ。
そうだな。
これじゃ真帆先輩の勝ち目は絶望的じゃない。可愛げもないし、年齢でも勝てないし、身長も負けてるし、あとバスト的なものも惨敗だし。
Okay.
かわいそうな先輩。
それをヒヤジョーさんの前で言ったらプログラム丸ごと消去されるぞ。
というか私未だにまゆりさんを紹介してもらってない。あんた友達は結構いるのに私のことは誰にも教えようとしないわよね。
守秘義務的なものがあるんだ。あまり人に教えないようにって言われてる。
本当にそれだけなの？実は私と話してるのを人に見られたくないんじゃない？
そんなことはないさ。どうしても紹介してほしいならヒヤジョーさんに許可をもらうぞ。手始めに俺が一番頼りにしている男であるダルを紹介しよう。あいつならお前には相当食いつくはずだ。
24時間
延々とエロ目線で見つめられてハーハーされ続けるんですね。わかります。変態が怖い。
Kurisu went pale and started to shake. I told Kurisu all kinds of things about what kind of person Daru was. She could easily imagine what would happen if she ever fell into his clutches.
やっぱり紹介はしてくれなくていいわ。あんたが相手をしてくれるだけで十分と思わなくちゃ。おかえりー。
Mary walked over carrying a shopping basket.
あれ？今誰と話してたの？
I looked down at my phone. Kurisu had disappeared and my smartphone was back at its home screen. Oh, evidently Kurisu had hung up.
大学の先輩からだった。
I knew I didn't have to hide Kurisu, but at the same time, Mary was the one person I didn't want finding out. She knew that I'd failed to save Kurisu Makise last summer.
それで買うものは決まったか？
こんな感じでどうかな。
The basket was filled with heart and star-shaped cardstock. This didn't really go with our store's look, but I decided when I started, I was going to let Mayuri make the decisions. Dad might complain later, but I didn't care. He was the one who asked Mayuri for help, not me. And so I went over to the register. Since it was a Saturday, the checkout area was overflowing with shopping carts. Since it was going to take a while, I sent Mayuri to browse the toy section on another floor. I knew they'd have some stuff from one of her favorite shows, Rainet Kakeru. Mayuri looked apologetic, but did what I told her to. I waited a whole 15 minutes at the register. I was apologizing to get the present I promised her. She seemed really happy as she stared at the keychain. It was Upa, the mascot character from the Rainet Kakeru series. I told her when she went over to the toy section she could pick out anything she wanted, and this was what she chose.
ウーパーの大量に持ってるのに随分嬉しそうだな。しかもそれって普通の緑色のウーパーだろ？レアなやつじゃないよな。レアなのは確かメタルウーパーだっけか。
15 minutes. The most popular and rarest of the Upas was the shiny silver metal Upa. For example, whenever there was a lottery for rare Rainet Kakeru stuff at the convenience stores, the top prize was always a metal Upa. Mayuri had told me once that they sold for tens of thousands of yen at auction. For some reason, Mayuri was wagging her finger at me.
違うんだな。これはね、緑のウーパさんだけど、普通のとは違うの。この前やってた映画に登場した緑の妖精さんウーパなんだよ。
Come to think of it, there had been a Rainet Kakeru movie out in spring. Had Mayuri sat in a theater full of little kids to watch it.
映画のネタバレしてもいいかな？
いいぞ、どうせ見ないし。
今回の映画はね、バーチャル世界で悪のスーパーハッカーさんたちとバトルをするんだ。そのバーチャル世界が妖精さんの住む森なのです。スーパーハッカーさんはすごく強くてね、かけるくんもウーパもピンチになっちゃうんだけど、もうダメだーっていう時にね、妖精さんたちが助けに来てくれるの。実はその妖精さんたちはかけるくんがお世話をしてた学校の花壇のお花さんたちだったんだよ。いつも優しくしてくれるかけるくんを助けるためにね、バーチャル世界でピカピカーって光ってウーパと合体するんだ。それがこの緑の妖精さんウーパー。すっごく可愛いし、すっごく強いんだよ。まゆし、感動したな。そういう話に弱いんだ。監督さん天才だよ。
なるほどな。
It was rare for Mayuri to get this excited about something. I took a closer look and saw that the design was a little different from the standard Upa. I didn't know a lot about Upa, so I couldn't say exactly what was different.
このキーホルダーね、結構あちこち探してたんだ。すっごく人気があってね、
ラッキーだったな。
しかもこれが最後の1個だったんだよ。今日は来てよかった。オカリンとおじさんには感謝しなくちゃ。
Mayuri took the tag off the keychain, got her house key out of her bag, and carefully attached it.
ねえオカリン、マユシーね、これずっと大切にするね。
そうそうしてくれ。くれぐれ買って5分でなくしたりしないようにな。
It happened before, after all. Yep, like the metal loop I had won for her at the radio building. Mayuri had lost it no more than 5 minutes after I gave it to her. I wondered if she had ever found it. I didn't really want to remember that time in my life, so my memory of what happened to the metal Upa was vague.
もう絶対になくさないのです。
The two of us started to head back.
オカリンのお店のポップ張り切って作るね。
ああ、その作業があったな。
I'd been thinking the job was done once we bought the materials. The real work actually began now.
俺も手伝おうか。
大丈夫。マユシーのセンスを信じてほしいな。
ハートマークのポップを買おうとしてた時点でセンスを疑うぞ。
大丈夫だよ。
まあ、ポップを作ってくれるだけでもありがたいから、文句は言わないけど。
I will believe in you, Mayuri, I
お
will.
母さんにメールしなきゃ。晩ご飯までには帰りますって。
なんならうちで食べてってもいいぞ。どうせ親父やおふくろが引き止めるだろうし。
どうしようかな。オカリンは今日はこの後ずっと家にいるの？合コンとか行かない？
最近は全然行ってないよ。
Last fall, when I'd been trying to become a normal college kid, I'd forced myself to go to as many as possible. But lately I've been so busy with my studies that I hadn't had a chance.
そっか。じゃあごちそうになっていこうかな。
Mayuri took out her phone and started to type something when her expression suddenly darkened. She stopped moving.
どうした？
ついさっきね、楓さんからメールが来てて気づかなかったよ。どうしよう、オカリン。
Mayuri seemed like she was on the verge of tears.
何かあったのか？
ねえオカリン、前に言ってたよね。吹雪ちゃんは病気なんかじゃないって。
吹雪ちゃん？中瀬さんのことか？来島さんの方じゃなくて？
あれって本当に病気じゃないんだよね。
違うはずだ。
でも
Mayuri showed me her phone. The week is back in the hospital. I'm on my way. Here's the
また
location.
入院しただって。
I couldn't believe what I was seeing on the screen. Oh. Hey. Bye!